Remy stood at the edge of the terrace overlooking the crashing waves, the salt air doing little to calm the storm brewing inside him as he waited for Dylan to arrive, knowing that the conversation ahead would change everything between them forever, because for weeks he had carried a truth too heavy to hide and a desire too complicated to explain. And when Dylan finally stepped through the glass doors with that guarded expression he always wore when expecting bad news, Remy realized there was no graceful way to begin, no gentle entry into the confession he had rehearsed 100 times, so he simply said it, that he wanted honesty, loyalty, and above all a future that wasn't built on half-truths and secret alliances, leaving Dylan stunned as memories of their tangled past resurfaced. From business betrayals to personal sacrifices neither of them had fully acknowledged, and Dylan, crossing his arms defensively, demanded to know why Remy was suddenly speaking as though their partnership were more than professional, prompting Remy to admit that somewhere along the way ambition had turned into admiration and admiration into something far more dangerous, something he could no longer ignore, especially now that outside forces were closing in and threatening to tear apart everything they had built together. And Dylan's silence spoke louder than anger as he wrestled with emotions he had buried beneath years of calculated decisions, realizing Remy wasn't asking for romance or control but for trust, the one thing Dylan had always struggled to give. While across town Hope paced anxiously in the design office, clutching sketches that symbolized not just her latest fashion vision but the future she feared slipping away because Ridge and Steffi had once again taken steps that excluded her voice, leaving her feeling like an outsider in a company she had fought to redefine. And when she finally summoned the courage to confront them both in the executive conference room, her resolve shocked even herself as she declared that she would no longer accept being sidelined, that the endless cycle of power plays and silent dismissals had pushed her to a breaking point, and Ridge, leaning back with the weary authority of a man accustomed to family conflict, tried to soften the moment with reassurance, insisting that every decision had been made for the good of the company. Yet Hope saw through the familiar justification and pressed harder, demanding clarity about where she truly stood, while Steffi, never one to retreat, challenged Hope's accusations head-on, arguing that leadership required strength and decisiveness rather than emotional appeals, sparking a heated exchange that echoed through the hallway as employees pretended not to listen but absorbed every word, because everyone sensed the confrontation marked a turning point, and Hope, refusing to back down, issued an ultimatum that left the room frozen. Either she would be granted equal authority and respect in shaping the brand's future, or she would walk away entirely, taking her vision, her creativity, and perhaps even loyal supporters with her. And Ridge's expression shifted from frustration to genuine concern as he realized Hope was no longer negotiating but drawing a boundary, while Steffi struggled between pride and pragmatism, aware that losing Hope could fracture not only the company's public image, but the fragile peace within their family. Meanwhile, Dylan, still reeling from Remy's confession, asked the question neither of them could avoid. What exactly did Remy want from him now? And Remy answered with disarming sincerity that he wanted partnership in its truest form, shared risks, shared victories, and the courage to stand together even when loyalty came at a personal cost, explaining that recent events had revealed who remained dependable when circumstances turned ruthless. And Dylan, remembering moments when Remy had quietly supported him despite disagreements, began to see the depth behind the request, realizing Remy wasn't demanding change overnight but offering a chance to rebuild trust from the ground up. Yet fear lingered, because accepting meant vulnerability, something Dylan had always avoided, and as dusk settled over the city the conversation grew more honest, touching on regrets neither man had voiced before, the betrayals they wished they could undo, and the realization that success meant little without someone who truly understood the sacrifices behind it. While back at the office, Hope's ultimatum continued to reverberate, forcing Ridge and Steffi into a rare moment of unity as they debated how to respond. Ridge arguing that Hope's passion represented the future and should be embraced rather than resisted, while Steffi worried that yielding authority might weaken the structure she had worked tirelessly to maintain. Yet beneath her resistance lay an unspoken acknowledgement that Hope's determination mirrored her own, and the rivalry between them had perhaps blinded both women to the possibility of collaboration instead of competition, and as night fell, Hope waited alone, uncertain whether she had just secured her place or destroyed it entirely, replaying every word she had spoken and wondering if courage always felt this much like fear, while Remy and Dylan reached an uneasy understanding, agreeing to move forward with cautious honesty, though both knew the true test would come when external pressures challenged their fragile truce, and the emotional currents connecting all of them began to intertwine in unexpected ways, because decisions made in boardrooms and whispered on terraces carried consequences far beyond professional ambitions, affecting friendships, families, and the delicate balance between loyalty and self-preservation. And as Ridge finally approached Hope with a measured response, acknowledging her value while requesting patience as they restructured leadership roles, Hope realized her ultimatum had forced long-overdue conversations, yet she remained firm, insisting that promises without action would no longer suffice, prompting Steffi to step forward and propose a tentative compromise that surprised everyone, a shared leadership initiative that required mutual accountability, signaling the first genuine attempt at unity rather than dominance. And Hope, though wary, recognized the sincerity behind the offer and agreed to consider it. The following morning dawned with an uneasy calm that none of them fully trusted, as though the world itself were holding its breath after the emotional upheaval of the night before, and Remy woke earlier than usual, replaying every word he had spoken to Dylan, questioning whether honesty had been bravery or recklessness. Yet deep down he felt lighter, as if years of guarded restraint had finally loosened their grip. While Dylan sat alone in his apartment staring at untouched coffee, realizing that Remy's request had unsettled him not because it was unreasonable, but because it demanded something he rarely offered anyone, genuine emotional investment, and he began to understand that avoiding vulnerability had cost him more relationships than he cared to admit, forcing him to confront the possibility that perhaps Remy was right about redefining what partnership truly meant. Meanwhile, at the Forrester offices, Hope arrived determined but apprehensive, aware that ultimatums created consequences that could not be undone, and every glance from co-workers felt charged with curiosity, rumors already spreading that a leadership shakeup was imminent, yet Hope refused to shrink under the attention, reminding herself that demanding respect was not arrogance, but necessity. And when Steffi entered moments later, their eyes met with a tension that was no longer purely adversarial, but complicated by mutual recognition, because each woman now understood the other's strength more clearly than before, and Ridge soon joined them, carrying the weight of mediation on his shoulders, announcing that he had spent the night considering Hope's words and acknowledged that the company could no longer operate under old divisions that fueled resentment instead of innovation, proposing a structured collaboration where creative direction would be shared and major decisions made transparently, an idea that sounded promising yet fragile, as though one misstep could shatter it completely. And Hope listened carefully, searching for sincerity rather than diplomacy, while Steffi surprised herself by admitting that she too had reflected on their rivalry and realized that competition had sometimes overshadowed respect, confessing that she feared losing control of a legacy she had fought to protect, and Hope, softened by the admission, acknowledged her own fear of being perpetually underestimated, creating a rare moment of honesty that transformed confrontation into conversation. Though neither woman fully lowered her guard, understanding trust would have to be earned gradually through action rather than words. While across town, Remy received an unexpected message from Dylan requesting another meeting, a simple request that nonetheless sent a rush of anticipation through him, because it signaled that Dylan had not retreated from the emotional risk, but was willing to continue the dialogue. And when they met again at a quiet cafe, Dylan spoke with newfound openness, admitting that he had always equated vulnerability with weakness, but had begun to see it instead as a form of courage, telling Remy that he was willing to attempt the kind of partnership Remy envisioned, though he warned that change would be imperfect and slow, and Remy accepted without hesitation, knowing that genuine transformation rarely happened instantly. And as they discussed future plans, they also addressed unresolved tensions from past decisions, apologizing for moments of mistrust that had created distance between them. Their conversation marking the first time both men approached each other not as strategists, but as equals navigating uncertainty together. Meanwhile, Hope's ultimatum continued to ripple through the company as employees sensed a shift toward inclusivity, morale cautiously improving as collaboration replaced whispered divisions, yet not everyone welcomed the change. And behind closed doors, some executives worried that shared leadership might weaken decisive authority, creating subtle resistance that Ridge would soon have to confront, adding another layer of complexity to an already delicate transition. And Steffi found herself wrestling privately with unexpected emotions, recognizing that Hope's determination mirrored her younger self, forcing her to reevaluate whether protecting legacy required dominance or adaptability, while Hope struggled with lingering doubt, wondering if compromise risked diluting the conviction that had driven her ultimatum in the first place. Yet she resolved to remain vigilant, determined to ensure promises translated into tangible opportunities. And as days passed, the evolving relationships began influencing one another in unforeseen ways, because Remy's growing trust in Dylan inspired him to approach business decisions with greater transparency, which in turn encouraged collaboration across departments, indirectly reinforcing the cultural shift Hope and Steffi were attempting to build, demonstrating how personal growth often sparked professional transformation. And Ridge observed these developments with cautious optimism, sensing that the conflicts threatening to fracture both company and family might instead become catalysts for renewal if handled with patience and humility, though he knew unresolved histories could resurface at any moment. And indeed, tensions soon reemerged when a high-stakes project forced Hope and Steffi to make their first shared executive decision under the new arrangement, testing whether cooperation could withstand pressure, as differing creative visions reignited sparks of rivalry. Yet this time, instead of escalating into confrontation, they paused, remembering the cost of past divisions, and through difficult discussion reached a compromise that blended both perspectives, producing a design concept stronger than either had imagined alone, surprising even themselves with the realization that collaboration enhanced rather than diminished individual influence. As the momentum of change continued to build, the fragile peace surrounding all of them began revealing new layers of complexity, because transformation rarely moved in a straight line, and Hope quickly discovered that shared leadership brought challenges she had not fully anticipated, as every decision now required negotiation rather than independence, forcing her to balance conviction with compromise. Yet she welcomed the challenge because for the first time, she felt genuinely heard, and the design team responded with renewed energy, inspired by the collaborative environment she and Steffi were slowly cultivating, while Ridge watched from a distance with cautious pride, recognizing that the next generation was reshaping the company in ways he never could have accomplished alone, though lingering concerns remained about whether old rivalries might resurface under pressure. And those concerns began to materialize when an influential investor questioned the company's new direction, suggesting that divided leadership signaled instability, a critique that threatened to undo weeks of progress, prompting an emergency meeting where Hope and Steffi were forced to present a united front despite underlying nerves. And as they stood side by side explaining their shared vision, something unexpected happened. Their confidence reinforced one another, turning skepticism into curiosity, proving that collaboration could project strength rather than weakness. And afterward, Steffi admitted privately that she had underestimated how powerful partnership could feel, while Hope acknowledged that Steffi's decisiveness grounded her more idealistic approach, marking another step toward mutual respect. Meanwhile, Remy and Dylan faced challenges of their own as rumors spread about their evolving alliance, causing colleagues to question motives and speculate about hidden agendas. Yet instead of retreating into secrecy, they chose transparency, openly discussing strategy and inviting feedback, a move that gradually disarmed critics and fostered a culture of openness that mirrored the transformation occurring at the fashion house. And Dylan found himself increasingly comfortable sharing responsibility, discovering that collaboration reduced the isolation he had long accepted as the price of leadership, while Remy experienced a growing sense of belonging that extended beyond professional success, realizing that what he truly wanted from Dylan had never been control or validation but connection built on trust. And as weeks passed, their partnership began influencing others around them, encouraging teams to communicate more honestly and resolve conflicts before they escalated, creating a ripple effect neither man had predicted, while Hope confronted a deeply personal realization that her ultimatum had been as much about self-worth as career ambition, because years of feeling overshadowed had quietly eroded her confidence, and reclaiming her voice required confronting those insecurities head-on. And during a late evening conversation with Ridge, she admitted her fear that success might still feel temporary, prompting Ridge to reassure her that leadership was not granted once, but earned continuously through courage and resilience, words that resonated deeply and strengthened her resolve to lead without apology, while Steffi grappled with her own internal conflict, recognizing that vulnerability, something she had long avoided, had become essential to maintaining the fragile alliance she and Hope were building, and in a rare moment of introspection she acknowledged that protecting legacy did not mean resisting change, but guiding it responsibly, and this realization softened her interactions with Hope, replacing sharp defensiveness with thoughtful dialogue, though sparks of rivalry occasionally remained, serving as reminders of how far they had come and how much further they still needed to go. And as the company prepared for a major launch event meant to showcase the results of their collaboration, tension mounted across every department, deadlines tightening and expectations rising, testing whether their newfound unity could survive real-world pressure, while Remy and Dylan navigated a parallel challenge when an unexpected crisis threatened one of their key ventures, forcing them into long nights of strategic planning where exhaustion stripped away remaining pretenses and left only honesty. And in those moments, Dylan confessed that trusting someone fully still frightened him, but he no longer wanted to lead alone, a statement that carried emotional weight far beyond business implications, and Remy responded not with grand assurances, but quiet consistency, reinforcing trust through action rather than promises, strengthening the bond between them in ways neither had anticipated when their journey began. And as the launch event finally arrived, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Industry insiders gathering to witness whether the company's bold new direction would succeed or falter, and when Hope and Steffi stepped onto the stage together, the symbolism was undeniable. Former rivals now presenting a shared vision, and their presentation blended creativity and strategy seamlessly, earning genuine applause that felt less like polite approval and more like recognition of authentic progress. While Ridge watched from the audience with emotion he rarely displayed publicly, realizing that the ultimatum he once feared had ultimately saved both family and company from stagnation, and backstage Hope and Steffi exchanged a glance of relief that spoke volumes, an unspoken acknowledgement that cooperation had achieved what competition never could. Meanwhile, Remy and Dylan received news that their crisis had been resolved through joint effort, validating their commitment to partnership and proving that trust could produce tangible success. And as celebrations unfolded across both worlds, the characters found themselves reflecting on the journeys that had brought them there, Remy recognizing that vulnerability had opened doors he once believed closed forever, Dylan accepting that strength and openness were not opposites but complements, Hope embracing leadership grounded in authenticity, Steffi redefining power through collaboration, and Ridge learning that letting go sometimes protected legacy more effectively than holding on too tightly.